Hey, if you're applying for an SBA loan and you heard your banker say this phrase, post-close liquidity, you might be just nodding your head, oh yeah, I think I've got that. I know what that means. You might actually be wondering, what in the world does that mean? Bankers like to use big words, makes them sound important. And I wanted to just describe what this actually means. What does post-close liquidity mean? And why it actually does matter quite a bit for your SBA loan application. So to put it simply, post-close liquidity is how much cash or funds that could be turned into cash quickly. So it could be the investments that you could sell and turn into cash quickly. How much of that kind of cash or investment do you have after you have made your equity investment into the business? So let's say you're starting a new business, and the SBA is going to require at least 10% as a equity investment into the deal, into the business. So, if you're looking to borrow $1 million, you're going to have to put in, or let's say the project is $1 million, you're going to borrow 900,000, you're going to put in 100,000 as your 10% equity. Now, the bank does not want you to put your last dollar into the equity of the business. So a lot of times what happens is people will say, oh, I've got the 10%, I've got the 10% down payment. Look, I've got $100,000 in my checking account. I'll move it all over to the business. And that will leave me with zero in my checking account or in my savings. And that is where this idea of post-closing liquidity comes in. The bank wants to make sure that you have some excess reserves personally, not in the business, but also personally after the equity investment into the business. So where this becomes important is a lot of times lenders want you to have 10% post-closing liquidity as well as a 10% equity investment into the business. So this ends up determining how much you can actually borrow. To give you an idea of how you could calculate this, I put together this little startup SBA loan calculator tool. Now, this is not perfect. It's just to give you kind of a rough idea, rough estimate, and there's not a hard and fast rule of exactly how much post-closing liquidity you need, but roughly, a lot of times I hear 10% is kind of a rule of thumb from a lot of lenders. So, there could be a question of nuance here. Is that 10% of the total project cost? Is it 10% of the SBA loan? And so that's a question here too. But just for simplicity's sake and easy math, I'm going to assume, let's say it's 10% of the loan here. So the way you can use this calculator then is you say, okay, how much can you invest into the business? I've got $125,000 to put into the business. That's going to leave me with $125,000 that I would have personally. So roughly speaking, you're going to be able to borrow at most $1.25 million here. Okay. Now let's say we change this. Let's say you're only going to have $50,000 left personally. Well, now, even though you invested $125,000 of equity into the business, because your post-closing liquidity is only $50,000, that's going to lower the amount that you're able to borrow. So maybe that brings that down to this $500,000 in this example. So now if we looked at it the other way around, so let's say I only could invest $25,000 into the business. Okay, maybe I could borrow roughly $250,000, even though I still have $50,000. And I have like 20% of the total here in my post-closing liquidity. So you can see how it's kind of the bigger of the two numbers doesn't actually matter. It's the smallest. It's the smallest number. So the smallest number, whether that's your equity investment or your post-closing liquidity, is probably going to drive how much you're actually able to borrow. So I wanted to just kind of outline that. Hope that's helpful as you're thinking about an SBA loan. If you would like a review, we offer a free SBA review. I'm going to put a link in the description of the video below to a form. You can fill out this form. It just gives us a little bit of information about your situation. We'll take a look at that, see how we might be able to help, think through what could be a good SBA loan option for you or what you might be eligible for. Yeah, and we'll happy to also answer questions that you might have if you reach out to us at support@ProjectionHub.com, and we can help you go through that thinking process with the SBA. So hope that's helpful. Thanks.